imagine being almost like chosen for this. It seems like a very divine stroke of fate to be in this trinity, to literally be a messenger of God, you could say, right? It just seems so like, if I was in that position, I'd be like, well, why me? Like, why is this happening to me? Were these like, do you know the backstory behind, like, were they just like kind of regular people, or did they go in this with the intention of transmission? Like, what's the backstory on the law of one?
Yeah, it's really amazing. Actually, they were Don Elkins was the original founder of the group, who had a group of like a dozen people that were practicing channeling for, I think, the better part of a decade, maybe a full decade, because they were somehow privy to the fact that they began as UFO researchers because the UFO phenomenon was really big back then. And they slowly figured out that if we want to understand these extraterrestrials, we really shouldn't be so concerned with their science as we should be with their philosophy.
Mm,
And really, they're a lot more concerned with philosophy than they are with science. Their science is just a means for them to disseminate their philosophy. So they somehow understood that these extraterrestrials don't use verbal language. They communicate telepathically through thought and through consciousness. And so we can communicate with them through the art of channeling. So they were doing these group experiments, and they were very much scientific in their approach, where Don would have all 12 of them uh, induce into a trance state, try to channel, and then they would all be separate. And then they would come together and write and share what they got in their sessions to see if there's any commonalities and stuff. And they had some success and they had some channeling come through. But it wasn't until Carla, who was dating one of the guys in the group, she just kind of came to watch or something, and she ended up really loving the environment and what they were doing. And she was like, I want to learn how to channel. So she started practicing and had a lot of passion for it. And she ended up becoming the best channeler they had. And she had the raw contact one day. And Jim told this story on my podcast interview with him. He was coming back from the grocery store and he kind of barged in the door. And Dawn was like, Jim, he's like, we got something. And he's like, oh, and he puts the groceries down and kind of tiptoes in the room, and he hears Carla channeling an entity. And he's like, we got something. So the three of them then decided to do a dedicated channeling session with this raw entity who was coming through. And they set up these really strict parameters. And when they made contact with Ra helped them set up the parameters of like, here's the best way to do this. And they said, we're only going to speak to you in the question and answer format. We're not here to like preach our gospel to you or start a religion or something. We're just here to be of service, and we don't want to infringe on your free will. So you ask us questions, and if it's not an infringement on your free will, we'll answer you. And so thus we have the raw contact.
wow, that's so far up. There's more
It
than
really
meets
is.
the eye going on, man. There's so much that we just don't know about this life. And if that stuff is possible, it's just like, what are we doing? Like, everybody's aperture is
Yeah.
this big, like we don't really know. We see the world as this big when it's really like there's this much going on. And it seems like, to me, we have these psychic powers that we have to yet to tap into. It's just, we really don't know what it means to be a human being. Like, we really don't. Like, we know, like I said, this much, but there's like, we might have these powers to communicate with beings of other densities. Like, that's just like, what? We don't learn that in school, man. Like, that's crazy.
We definitely don't. But the thing about it is, we're not like, we have to open ourselves to the possibilities. We
Hmm.
have to stop being so arrogant to think we know everything. Um, like the reductionist, rationalist, skeptical approach that a lot of scientists take, where if you can't just show it to me in the palm of your hand, it doesn't exist. It's like, well, guess what? They will always honor that. If that's the attitude we have towards anything, the ETs literally, they can't communicate with us because that'd be a violation of our free will, and they would depolarize themselves. They would lose polarity. And on the service to others path, it's a win-win when it's done right. So they're very eager to communicate with us, and they want to be of service. They're truly beings of pure love, and they see us as them. They see us as their own brothers who are stuck on this little planet Earth that are just suffering so terribly and confused and lost. And they so badly want to help us out, but they also have to honor our free will, and they have to wait for us to acknowledge them and say, hey, we want contact with you. And then they'll be more than happy to help us eradicate disease on our planet, famine, every world issue you can think of. But they're waiting for us. So it's like, yeah, we got to get our thumbs out of our butts and figure out where we are in this vast universe. Like even the fact, I don't know about you, but whenever I hear, whether it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody on Joe Rogan's podcast, where they're like, you think we're alone in the universe? I'm just like, oh, it's so cringy. It's so embarrassing. We ask that. And even when they go, I don't think we're alone. It's like, even that's an embarrassing answer. It's like, it should be so stunningly obvious we're not alone. The question is, why aren't we receiving contact? Because we're not alone. Must be because we're not at the state yet where we're ready for that. Like these entities know if they gave us any kind of technology they have, I mean, we're still going to war with each other now with this primitive ape technology we have. Like imagine if we knew how to use gravity. You don't think Russia, China, the US would be going to war with each other for supreme dominance over planet Earth? You bet your bottom dollar they would. So these beings aren't going to help us out and give us technology. But any person, truthfully, who reaches out to them, whether it's like Stephen Greer's CE5 meditations, I don't know if you've heard of that before, but there's some documentaries on Netflix, Unacknowledged. I think that's on Netflix. Yeah. On Prime, there's Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, where Stephen Greer explains how they communicate with these ETs. And these people go out to the desert. And I actually have a good friend of mine who works for Gaia here in Colorado as a video editor. And he's gone out to the desert to do these CE5 meditations, where you basically just get into a meditative state where you drop out of the thinking mind and you get into that field of consciousness where you can communicate with them, and you just send them love and send them light and say, welcome, please. I would love to communicate with you. I welcome you to this planet. And these UFOs start showing up in the sky. And it's just incredible the amount of footage that people have had from doing these events. And even in channeling, like people that learn how to channel, they find there's always an entity ready to communicate with them. It's just a matter of them finding entities who are reaching out to them first, so that they're not violating free will in doing so.
I see. So it's like if they were to, if we were to bring a gray alien on the Today Show, that would kind of screw up the matrix in a way. There would just be like this, it just wouldn't work. Like we're not ready, essentially. Is that it?
Dude, total pandemonium, world religions collapsing overnight, wars, you name it. Like it would destabilize our planet if they did something like that.
Yeah.
There's so many unconscious people still on planet Earth that couldn't handle that kind of a recognition. I mean, they believe they're this person. There's just this one world. There's probably nobody else out there. It's all about me. Everything revolves around me. And imagine breaking out of that tiny little eggshell and realizing you're just a speck on a speck in an infinite ocean of specks. I mean, that's going to cause a lot of mental panic in people, right? So they are acclimating us to their presence very slowly with these unbelievable UFO sightings we're having lately. I mean, military pilots, even our own government has come out and said the UFO phenomenon's real. And in September, the Pentagon came out, sort of slyly under the table while the COVID pandemic's happening. They're like, hey, by the way, we have a UFO. Did you hear that?
Yeah. Nobody talked about it, really.
Nobody talked about it. It's like, I mean, even when you have something like the Phoenix Lights, okay, 1997, there was a craft that was described as a mile-wide triangular formation that appeared over Phoenix for, I don't know, like 20 or 30 minutes, that tens of thousands of people saw. Every branch of government saw. It showed up on radar. They dispatched jets, helicopters, military to go check it out. All kinds of footage. I mean, a straight up movie level UFO encounter. And then this craft, silently not making a single noise, hovering over the city, and then just disappears out of sight, reappears over Tucson or something, floats over there for a while, disappears. And then these ETs are like, hey guys, we're here, just letting you know. And the next day they're like, well, back to business as usual. Like it didn't change anything because it's a testament to how unconscious we still are. We don't
Yeah.
really want to believe that we're not alone.
Mm. Wow. What do you think it's gonna take? We just slowly, gradually just have to come to the realization, like each individual has to kind of know that we're not this body. Is that kind of why we're going through this process, you think, right now? It's just like it's a slow metamorphosis um deconditioning, and then from there these beings know that we're kind of going through that process, but we're not collectively there yet. But once we are, that's when these beings that seem like, from what we're describing, they seem like guardian angels in a way. Are
100%.
they? So they know that they, until we're at that point, they can't really come and help us, right?
Yeah, I have a hunch that if we did end up on the brink of extinction, whether that's through war or some biological disease or weapon, I think that they would step in to help us
Hmm.
rather than just watching us be annihilated,
I've heard that before. I think, sorry to interrupt. I've heard that, like, I don't know if it was the law of one, but one time that I guess there was something where one country was going to launch some nuclear weapon, and then the launch codes decided they
Oh
like
yeah.
malfunctioned at like a weird point. And I guess the story was that like these extraterrestrials came in and messed with the launch code, so the weapon couldn't launch or something like that. Do you know anything about that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the ETs that we see seem to be very concerned with our weapons of mass destruction, and there's a number of reports of um, it really has happened many times where fighter pilots on routine patrol missions or whatever test flights, they find these UFOs and they shoot at them, and these extraterrestrials show such a Gandhian level of pacifism towards us. They just sort of disappear out of sight, or they just leave. There's never been a single event that proves any kind of hostility from a unidentified flying object. And there's been a number of occasions that you're talking about where we have tried to launch our nuclear warheads into outer space to test them, and they've either been, all of a sudden the computer system gets like taken over and they can't figure out what's going on, and then everything gets defragged and they can't launch the rocket. And there's actually one event that happened that I think it's on the Unacknowledged documentary. They interview the military like generals who are overseeing all this, and they said they launched the rocket and a UFO appears in the sky on the right side of it, shoots a beam of light into it, disappears, reappears above it, shoots a beam of light down onto it, disappears, reappears on the left, shoots a beam of light, reappears at the bottom, shoots a beam of light up inside of it, and then just zips off into hyperspace. And the warhead just crashes down to the surface and doesn't detonate or explode, just falls back down to Earth and is neutralized. And he said, his commanding officer looked at him and said, "What the hell was that?" And he looks back at him and says, "I think that was a UFO."
Wow. Yeah,
So
there's so
yeah.
much going on,
And
man.
this is declassified from the military. This isn't like, oh, some guy said this once happened. This is fully like open
Hmm.
information that the military has disclosed already. It's
Hmm.
pretty amazing.
That's what's funny to me, is it's all out there. Like, there is literally
It's all
so much
there.
information out there that is from official sources, and nobody's really cares about it. We're just like you said right now, it's just like, oh, it's just another UFO sighting. It's whatever.
Yeah, but
Mm,
what's good is that it's becoming normal now. Like you don't really hear true UFO skeptics anymore. There's still some around, like here and there, but even the vast majority of like scientists will acknowledge that the UFO phenomenon exists. It's now more of a question of like, well, what do you think they are?
mm,
And they'll say, well, they might be us from the future. They kind of use everything but aliens as an option. They'll say like
mhm.
maybe they're interdimensional bleeding from other dimensions is what we're seeing. Um, Maybe they're AI robots from the future or whatever coming back to observe humankind before their inception, whatever, right? But nobody really says, "Oh, there's no UFOs."
Yeah.
So that's really good because as long as the farther along the collective consciousness can come to acknowledging them, the more they're going to keep showing us their presence more and more often, which is what's happening now. The more it becomes accepted as normal, the more free they are to continue on that vein. And even things like crop circles, right? I really think that some of these crop circles we see that literally just materialize in a matter of hours, like a farmer's out in his cornfield, comes back in the afternoon, there's this enormous sacred geometry shape impressed into his crop with perfect mathematical symmetry that we don't have the technology to do that even today. And they go, oh, must be a bunch of hoaxers. Like the mind still can't grasp anything outside of its paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really amazing, isn't it, to think how would an intelligent, benevolent, loving species make us aware of their presence? They would probably do something like planting a sacred geometric shape somewhere that would show, hey, we're intelligent. You guys can't do this, so it's not you that did it. There you go. We're out, you know.
It's like they're messing with us, you know?
Well, I don't think they're messing with us. I think that they're just acclimating us to their presence in ways that are undeniable. And I also think, this is just my theory, I mean, if you look at some of these crop circles, they are marvelous to look at. They're incredible. And sacred geometry is really just math. And math is the universal language of the universe. And everything can be explained in mathematics. And sacred geometry is really just like formulas in geometric form or shape. So I think that a lot of these crop circles that appear with these mesmerizing formations, they're probably like imprinting the cure for cancer, the theory of gravity, like, you know what I mean? They're probably giving us information. I think that these crop circles definitely mean something, but we're just not at the level of intelligence to decipher what that meaning is yet.
They're just messages, you're saying?
I think that it's a message in and of itself, right? Like, hey, we're here and you can't deny we're here, but we obviously don't have bad intentions. Otherwise we could, game, set, match overnight if we wanted to, but we're definitely here. You can't deny we're here. So we must be peaceful, right? It's kind of their way of sending that message without, again, appearing on the front lawn of the White House and showing up on CNN or something. They're not going to do that.
Yeah. So these are, I touched upon it before. They're like guardian angels, would you say?
100%. Yeah.
Do you think that like these stories that are in books of people seeing these apparitions and seeing these beings are of we're seeing the same beings, and essentially today when we see a UFO, it's kind of like on the same line?
Yeah, I think that what we have called angels for thousands of years in religious traditions are extraterrestrials. The Law of One describes that as these beings continue evolving, and the density of light continues to get more and more dense, that the body that souls inhabit are more and more just a light body. And so the vast majority of extraterrestrial encounters that get reported are always these beings of light. And that's what's described as in the Bible. The angel of the Lord showed up in front of the tomb and it shone with such a radiant light that it was blinding. That's a classic ET encounter. And so what is an ancient world what else are they going to do with that kind of an experience, right? They're going to have to make it into some kind of religious thing. But there is no like we always think of angels as like, oh, they're some other thing. They're not like us, they're in some other dimension of God's universe and they're like his manservants or something. It's like, nope, they're really just beings like us in a future state of evolution.
They are us.
They are us, yeah.
So these beings don't even see themselves as separate beings. Like we say aliens, but there's really only one alien, right?
There's a passage in the Law of One that's super funny where Don is asking Ra about close encounters of the third kind or the fourth kind or whatever. And Ra says something like, we are appreciating the humorous aspect of your query, for all is the one creator. So is therefore not every encounter very, very close?
That's funny.
Like there's some good alien humor.
Alien humor. That's great.